I recently had a guided visualization with my therapist that I thought was worth sharing with you guys. To my surprise, when she asked me to call upon my inner wisdom as sort of person from my past, little Chrissy came up, my inner child. And I sincerely thought that I was doing it wrong. I thought that my guide should be an adult. And I was instructed by my therapist to ask little Chrissy for advice. And I was so surprised when little Chrissy was sort of like, it was like I had to pan the camera down in order to talk to her because she was so small and blonde and cute. And when I asked her for advice, she told me not to forget to play. She said, don't take yourself too seriously. Remember to stay playful and have a good time. And I realized how gentle and wise she is. And truth be told, I have spent most of my adult life forgetting to play. Don't mistake that with the partying that I did to numb myself in my 20s and even in my 30s. But I realized that I grew up too fast. I was forced into adulthood at a very early age. And as a result, I spent my 20s and even part of my 30s trying to reclaim the childhood that I missed out on. I battled debilitating depression and heart-wrenching anxiety. I mean, I had crazy panic attacks where I sincerely thought that I was dying of a heart attack. And I just generally spent pretty much all of my 20s, a lot of my teen years, feeling completely detached from reality. And a lot of that was because I was drinking a lot to numb my pain. But there was kind of a monumental moment in my life, and it was my 21st birthday. I went out and partied, of course. And then I started thinking about my dad and how he was never around when I was growing up, and how he and my mom divorced, and my dad went off to raise someone else's family. And he didn't call me. He didn't call me on my birthday. He forgot. And I felt so unimportant. And I went through a shame spiral. I completely spiraled. It was the worst panic attack that I've ever had. And it scared me. It really scared me. I've laid in bed feeling like I was an astronaut in one of those anti-gravity machines that spins in every direction. It was like complete vertigo. My heart was pounding out of my chest. I was sweating but cold, and every muscle in my body was tense. I was weeping uncontrollably and terrified. And so it wasn't long after that that I found a therapist, and I found a psychiatrist and started getting support. I started taking medications in college and slowly but surely started to get back on track, kind of stabilizing my moods somewhere sort of in the middle range. But there were still a lot of ups and downs. I got so depressed that I couldn't leave my bed for a month. I think I failed all of my classes that semester. And around the same time that I started seeing a therapist, I also attended my first yoga class and started to see the benefit of doing breath work and meditation and a mindfulness practice. It has been a long, slow process, of course, but over time, I've been able to get off medication for, I don't even know how long now. I'm 37 years old, and it's definitely in my early 20s that I left medication. And I've been able to stabilize my moods, I would say, very significantly. I still have a very human experience with ups and downs, but ultimately, the super highs and the super lows are pretty much obsolete. I also unraveled the tapestry of an incredibly dysfunctional childhood and conditioning from all of the trauma through therapy with the help of multiple therapists over the years, multiple self-help books, this ongoing journey with mindfulness, which I really define as a practice of returning to myself and learning to recognize the critical voices in my head as merely thoughts. And rather than attaching myself to those feelings or thoughts, I've learned to find a sort of distance. And it's not a distance from myself. It's more of a kind of observation, a non-attachment, so that I'm not identifying with each and every single one of those thoughts and feelings. I realize that there's this sort of big I that's capable of witnessing my mind rather than associating with it 100%. And so I guess, towards the end of my 30s, I started to realize, maybe it was when I read the book, The Alchemist, which is just such an incredible hero's journey tale. I realized that living a meaningful life is really about being on the journey that returns you to yourself. And for me, it's about continuing to learn from others, but checking in with me along the way. So I'm building this kind of stronger habit of checking in with me, but also with little me, with little Chrissy, that kind of inner child. For a long time, it felt so ridiculous to even talk about an inner child. It felt sort of absurd or silly. But I realize that she tells me what she needs, and it's really powerful. There's this little girl inside me that sort of stopped growing and developing as my life got harder, when I was forced to become an adult as a child, when I learned to take care of everyone else's needs and ignore my own in hopes to have my needs met and to be taken care of. And it didn't work that way. I just eventually learned to completely put my needs to the side so much that I became numb to them. So this journey for me is about learning how to return to myself, how to tune in deeply with myself. And to my surprise, my inner child is really wise and she's pretty funny. More often than not, she's wiser than anyone else I know. And she has really good ideas. I mean, she kind of just knows exactly what I need. And that makes sense because she's me. But there's this kind of disintegration. There's this sort of detachment from that child when you learn to numb yourself and put your needs to the side. So this practice is kind of the newest phase of my personal mindfulness journey, and I'm doing it with the help of a therapist, but I am slowly reconnecting to this inner child. And that approach has been having to check in with my inner child everything that happens, basically. Every time I get upset, every time I'm frustrated, or more often than not feeling detached from myself and not even sure what I'm feeling, I check in with her, and if I can get to a good quiet place, she has a voice. It's pretty interesting, actually. She's funny, for one thing. In that guided visualization, I was like, it can't possibly be little Chrissy. So then I tried to sort of force it to be my grandma or my great grandmother, thinking that it needed to be an adult, this guide. And then when I went to ask my grandma a question, she didn't answer. And then it was almost as if the camera had to like pan down, and little Chrissy was down there jumping around, waving her arms like, hello, I'm down here. And she was like, don't forget to play. Have a good time. She's right. I forget to play all the time. It's not supposed to be super stressful. We only get to live one life, at least in this form. So why do we take ourselves so seriously? It's because we're attached to our thoughts and our identity, our ego. And doing inner child work is an opportunity to explore that deeply and playfully. So I incorporate this as a yoga instructor. I incorporate this as a coach who helps people deal with stress and burnout prevention, high achieving people who really, have a need to be seen and heard. Oftentimes have a need to heal some wounds from their childhood. So you can call it whatever you want. The inner child work works for me at this stage in my life because I'm ready to not take myself so seriously. But that may not resonate with everyone, and that's okay. But to all of you who are struggling, I can't recommend therapy or a coach, yoga classes, breath work, meditation, self-help books, calling on a friend enough. I mean, really, I don't know where I would be without that kind of help and support. So if you're interested in coaching or therapy, I highly encourage you to reach out. You're doing great, and just know the journey is long and it's sometimes very slow, but it's incredibly rewarding. Please drop any questions or comments that you might have down below, and let me know if there are any other topics that you'd like me to cover. So I'll sign off for now. Thanks so much for joining me and for listening to my story and this little slice of my journey. I hope it helps. Namaste.